gentlemen, I would like to welcome you to the International Conference on Transhumanism, co-organized by the Hassai Theological Faculty at Charles University and the Protestant Lutheran Theological Faculty at Comenius University in Bratislava. My name is Kamila Veverková and I am Dean of the Hassai Theological Faculty. The conference is moderated by Professor Laucho from Comenius University in Bratislava. We are gathered here from near and far to come together as colleagues in the university, as theologians, scholars who work for the university, the church society as a whole. We are united by a common context, perhaps even a common concern. We live in Europe, dynamic, diverse region, where religion and spirituality and traditional values continue to play a key role in the lives of our people. And we are therefore particularly happy to see theologians and scholars from different institutions coming together for this conference. We have set ourselves the task of reflecting on transhumanism in its various dimensions. Finally, I would like to thank all of you for taking the time to participate in this discussion on transhumanism. Thank you and wish you success of conference. Thank you.
Thank you, Dean Veverková. We are very, very glad that we can be at this institution and that you have decided to co-organize and to host this conference. Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed colleagues and distinguished guests, allow me on behalf of the second organizing institution of this conference, the Evangelical Lutheran Theological Faculty of Comenius University in Bratislava, to welcome all of you to the International Conference on the future of Imago Dei theologies in the context of the new challenges of transhumanism. It is a great honor to be here at this prestigious Hussite Theological Faculty in Prague, collaborating with the Evangelical Lutheran Theological Faculty of Comenius University to bring together some of the brightest minds in theology, pedagogy, philosophy, but also law, legal studies. We gather here today thanks to the generous support of the University of Oxford's New Horizons for Science and Religion in Central and Eastern Europe project, funded by the John Templeton Foundation. And with this, I wish to express my gratitude for their generous support. Our modern world faces unprecedented challenges, as well as opportunities, as the advancement of technology continues to transform our understanding of what it means to be human. Transhumanism, with its pursuit of enhancing human capabilities and extending human life beyond its current limits, raises crucial questions about the future of anthropology, of course, the Imago Dei theologies that are so important for Christian theology, and how they relate to this rapidly evolving landscape. Naturally, these technological advancements raise other questions, legal, ethical. So the study of this new trend is really complex and quite fascinating, but also difficult. As we gather today, we are at a pivotal moment in history, where the dialogue between science, religion, pedagogy, law, and philosophy and other disciplines has never been more critical. I'm sure all of you have heard about the latest development in large language models, artificial intelligence tools such as ChatGPT, and others, and how they are potentially disruptive to individuals and societies, but also potentially very helpful in achieving a greater efficiency as we perform different tasks. So the point is, we need to think about this holistically and critically. This conference will not deal with ChatGPT and large language models, although there is one contribution that touches this subject, but this is not our primary focus. The primary focus is on transhumanism and its impact on anthropology. The conference will feature thought-provoking speeches, presentations, and discussions by scholars from the Czech Republic, Slovakia, Austria, and Poland, each bringing their unique insights and expertise to bear on this complex and fascinating topic. Our aim is to foster an environment of interdisciplinary dialogue and collaboration. We wish to examine the ethical and moral implications of transhumanism while exploring how Imago Dei theologies can contribute to these vital conversations. This is the wider framework of the research project that we are continually working on, thanks to the support of John Templeton Foundation. Through our collective efforts, we hope to gain a better understanding of these challenges, and in doing so, chart a path forward that respects human dignity, promotes human flourishing, and acknowledges the transcendent aspects of our human existence. We are delighted to have such an esteemed group of participants joining us today, each contributing their knowledge and wisdom to this essential conversation. We will discuss a range of topics, from the anthropological challenges posed by artificial intelligence to the impact of transhumanism on human rights discourse and the ethical challenges of devaluing human life in the age of technology. Ladies and gentlemen, before we proceed, I would like to express my sincere regrets that several esteemed colleagues who were originally scheduled to participate in this conference are unable to join us in person. Namely, I regret to announce that our Dean of our theological faculty, Dr. Milan Juric, had to cancel his participation at the very last moment because of other administrative duties that simply emerged just 2 days ago, and he couldn't say no to them. So he will not be joining us today, even though he wished to do so very much, and he sends his greetings. Also, we deeply regret that Professor John Selvamani, Dean of Fujian Academia Cattolica, an associate professor at the Department of Medicine at Fujian Catholic University in Taipei, could not join us online. He wished to present, but other commitments prevented him from doing so. Likewise, Professor Nguyen Huang Hai, Vice President of Vietnam National University in Hanoi, and Associate Professor Nguyen Tai Dong, Director of the Institute of Philosophy at the Vietnam Academy of Social Sciences in Hanoi, are unable to attend. They were supposed to come in person, but their travel arrangements changed last minute, and they could not come, unfortunately. While their physical presence and online presence will be missed, their valuable insights and perspectives on the topics will be included in a scientific volume published by Litverlag this year, and I hope all of our contributions as well will be included in this volume, providing that you submit them to me. We hope to have the opportunity to engage with all of you in the future, in future events, and continue the important conversations we embark upon today. In closing, I would like to express my gratitude to each and every one of you for your presence and participation in this worthy academic event. And once again, I thank our host the Dean, Dr. Veverkova, Associate Professor, and also Associate Professor Noemi Bravena, they have both been instrumental in making this event possible, organizing everything, and welcoming us here today. So thank you very much for doing so. We invite you to engage fully in the conversations and debates that will unfold, for it is through our collective pursuit of knowledge and understanding that we can navigate the challenges and opportunities of our rapidly changing world. One more disclaimer before we continue. The opinions expressed in the presentations that will follow are those of the authors and do not necessarily reflect the views of the John Templeton Foundation as the sponsoring institution. Now let us embark on this journey together as we explore the new challenges and opportunities of transhumanism. Welcome, and may our time together be both enlightening and inspiring. We will begin with our first session now. Our keynote speaker this morning is Professor Wolfgang Palaver, who came to us from the University of Innsbruck, Faculty of Theology. And Professor Palaver, you will have 30 minutes or so to present. And right after your presentation will be a discussion. And then we will have two more presenters in this session. They will present one after another. Professor Winfried Loeffler, also from Innsbruck, but from Faculty of Philosophy, will be our second presenter in this session. And then Professor Marek Rembiesch from the Silesian University. So the two professors will then present after the keynote presentation, and we will have a discussion related to their presentations after they present. And then we'll have a break, and I will have a few more announcements to make. So without further comments or useless spending of time, please, Professor Palaver, come and present your paper. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for your kind invitation. The main reason that I tried to come, because it was tight schedule, was the fact that I've never been in Prague before, so it's a great opportunity to visit the Golden City. Is it called like that? Yeah. Okay. I will keep to my 30 minutes, and I will go into the complex relationship of religion and technology in 4 steps. I will first of all show you how technology and religion are often close, and maybe today even closer than before. I will, in a second step, address the dangers coming along with weak AI, believing that strong AI, and I will show you the difference later on, is probably not a problem we have to deal, but we have already problems today that we have to realize. In a second step that is now going more into anthropology, I will talk about how AI and technology is related to a desire to become like gods, and what are the anthropological questions following the longing for strong AI. And in a very short 4th step, I will address the question how to use technology without becoming enslaved by it. And my first step, and I always have to turn around if the thing is up there. In the first step, I will just show you some interesting insights how technology and religion are closely intertwined, so to say. So the second reason that I accepted is that from 2004 until 2023, I taught ethics for computer science students at our university, not in our faculty, but in the faculty of mathematics and computer science students, related to my former training as an engineer in electronics, so that was an interesting opportunity. I did that for 19 years, and probably I stop now, so that will be my last paper, because the challenge was to keep up with the technological development. So when I started in 2004, there was no iPhone, there was no Kindle, there was no Facebook, so many things we have to face today didn't exist. So in my last lecture that ended in January, I dealt with ChatGPT, but that came in November into our world. So I said to my students, your professor will soon retire, but I am on the cutting edge of the development. but now I can stop to read this. But what was astonishing for me when I prepared that course and kept up with the base of publications and so on, was the interesting thing how often religious topics are addressed by media thinkers, by philosophers of technology who are not theologians, who just observe this interesting connection between technology and religion. And I give you a few quick examples without going into detail. So first example is the media philosopher Marshall McLuhan, who predicted that the electronic age could be some kind of electronic Pentecost. He said, today computers hold out the promise of a means of instant translation of any code or language into any other code or language. The computer promises by technology a Pentecostal condition of universal understanding and unity. When I taught that for the first time, there were about 100 students, so some students, representatives of the student came up and said, you use terms we do not know, and this is very disturbing for us, and said, which term do you not know? They said Pentecost, we don't know Pentecost. Of course they knew I'm from the theological faculty and they were the computer science students, so computer science students do not have to know what Pentecost is. But in order to show them what McLuhan is after, they have to know Pentecost, and I think most of them vaguely at least knew that Pentecost are 2 free days in Austria, good for holiday. A second thinker who is some way related but different than McLuhan is Wilhelm Flusser, who thought that the electronic age and those new possibilities will probably bring the Platonic Academy and the Jewish Sabbath together. Only when school and celebrations meet, when academy and Sabbath merge, when space and time negate each other, one can expect the Western tradition to be complete. This is the religious aspects of telematics. So that was what he developed. And Flusser is from the Czech Republic, was from the Czech Republic, right? Yeah? You are familiar with Flusser? Well, he was from Jewish background. He had a very famous Jewish philosopher as a brother, David Flusser, and most of his family were killed by the Nazis, and he himself survived in Brasilia, there developed his things, and in his last years he came back and had a lot of lectures in Germany, and I think he was killed by a car accident in the Czech Republic. So 2 more recent examples. Ray Kurzweil, who is a figure always addressed in questions of transhumanism. So his book, The Singularity is Near, of course, plays with biblical wordings. So it's a play on Matthew 3:2, the kingdom of heaven has come near. And the theological overtones you also see in Yuval Noah Harari's book Homo Deus, of course, in the title. So by equating the human experience with data patterns, dataism undermines our primary source of authority and meaning and heralds a tremendous religious revolution, the like of which has not been seen since the 18th century. So what is going on? That's the last chapter of the book. The title is Data Religion, and he says what's going on right now is a huge religious revolution, whatever that means. A next example, and I will say a little bit more about him, is Jaron Lanier, who developed virtual reality, so comes from the field, but wrote a couple of years ago a very interesting small book with the title 10 Arguments for Deleting Your Social Media Accounts Right Now. And the main criticism of this little book is the business model. He calls it BAMA, behaviors of users modified and made into an empire for rent. So what Lanier tells us is that we are not the customers, so to say, of Facebook or Google. We are the product that is sold by those companies for their own benefit. But he goes into religious questions also. So he says the BAMA business is interwoven with a new religion that grants empathy to computer programs, calling them AI programs, as a way to avoid noticing that it is degrading the dignity, stature and rights of real humans. So that is one of his concerns. And I conclude this section with a small, very interesting book by a Lutheran theologian, Philipp Häfner, who focused over many years on questions of science and technology. He was for a couple of years the editor-in-chief of Zigong, so the journal who focuses on a high level on religion and science. And in this little book he says, transcendence is a fundamental element of both human nature and technology. So if you see the close relationship between religion and technology, you can, as a theologian or a religious person, tend to come to a fundamentalist position and says this is very dangerous, we should completely reject it. But if religious people would reject technology completely, they would in some way reject the root of what is also the root of religion. It's the self-transcending dimension of human life. So the self-transcending dimension of human life makes us able to develop technologies, but it's also part of our religious longings. So you see, when Häfner refers to the famous words of Augustine of the restlessness of the human heart, that he says, restlessness is as fundamental as meaning, because restlessness is the meaning. Our drive for self-transcendence is an expression of this restlessness. Technology is therefore also an expression of it. We encounter God, sharing God through that restlessness. So therefore, there's a close connection, a deeper root in humanity's ability and necessity to self-transcend ourselves. That is the root of technology, and that is the root of religion. So we cannot ban, we cannot stop technology without stopping becoming human beings, stopping religion. So I go to my second section and just make a quick distinction according to the UNESCO definitions between weak AI and strong AI. Weak AI, or artificial narrow intelligence, is the only form of AI that humanity has achieved so far. Machines that are capable of performing certain precise tasks autonomously, but without consciousness, within a framework defined by humans and following decisions taken by humans alone. And strong AI would be a machine that has consciousness and feelings and is capable of providing solutions for any kind of problem, that is pure fiction for now. And we collaborate, both our faculties, also with the experts in computer science and with the experts in artificial intelligence, and the Innsbruck expert on artificial intelligence, Justus Piatta, told me and told us also in a workshop, strong AI is maybe not possible at all, or if it's possible, it's far into the future. Weak AI, we are already immersed in weak AI and have to deal with weak AI, and has already now so many problems and dangers that we should focus on the dangers coming along with what we already have, and not so much think about things that are probably not possible. So I will shortly give two examples of how weak AI is dangerous, and I come back to the book of Lanier. He has 10 reasons why we should stop our social media accounts. I did not stop, so if you go into social media you will see me, so the book didn't cause me to stop it. But I used it for my students, and I think it's a very important book because it gives you good reasons why you should think about stopping, or at least you should realize what's going on with us. So three of those 10 reasons. Anthropologically most interesting: social media hates your soul. Social media is making you into an asshole, and we can observe that with ourselves if we react very often, and we observe it in society. And social media is making politics impossible. So to explain a little bit the second reason, you all know that the biggest asshole gets the most attention, and they often end up giving a platform its flavor. So those people who are most aggressively posting on social media get a lot of attention, and the whole business model needs our attention. The more we watch YouTube, the more we interact with Facebook, the better is it for the companies to sell our attention to the companies who pay the advertisement. So therefore, the whole business model that currently shapes Google, Facebook, and so on is in some way endangering our society, because it makes negative emotions very powerful. And we see already in several countries the impact on the social life, what is enhanced by this business model. The second thing is that he also addresses democracy, politics, and says democracy needs in some way also the single responsible person who makes his decision. But the democracy, very much shaped by social media, switches to the pack, and tribal voting, personality cults, and authoritarianism are the politics of a pack setting. And we saw that we know now that Brexit and also the election of Trump and many other examples followed this pattern. A second example is a very interesting book by Cathy O'Neill, Weapons of Mass Destruction, and she shows how algorithms are used for policing. Algorithms are used more and more for entry of universities and for many other reasons, and it shows how destructive those use of algorithms are. And interestingly, she again has some religious metaphors. So she talks about mathematical models that are opaque like gods, and the representatives of these models are their highest priests. Promising efficiency and fairness, they distort higher education, drive up debt, spur mass incarceration, pummel the poor at nearly every juncture, and undermine democracy. So that is my two examples and Justus Piatta, who is very worried about some of the things, that we should really think carefully how we can overcome those things, the problems. And we are not yet really able on a social and political level to have good means to help us to overcome those dangers. But I go now to my third step, and that's the anthropological question, more connected now for the longing. Why do we desire strong AI? And I titled that with Becoming Like God. And one of the German pioneers, Konrad Zuse, who developed the first programmable computer in 1941, made an interesting statement. He says, the danger of computers becoming like humans is not as great as the danger of humans becoming like computers. And when I found this quote, I said, I can first of all fully understand it, and I fully agree with this statement. And in this third section, I will unfold a little bit in what way do I agree with Konrad Zuse. So the first example is, what does it mean if computers become like humans? And if we would have more time, but we have only 30 minutes, in my classes I always show from Spielberg's movie AI, Artificial Intelligence. It's not a good movie in total, it's 3 hours, it's a little bit strange, a computer Pinocchio story, so to say, but some parts of this movie are very good. So you can say there are 3 movies in this 3-hour movie, and the first movie is about if we would create robots who can have emotions like human beings, and we would really try to make them as human as possible, they would be envious, they would be jealous, and there would be a lot of troubles. And in the first part of the movie, there is a real child who was in coma but comes back to life, and there is David, the robot child, and the real child, of course, teases the robot child and said, you are mechanic, I am organic, you are weaker, I am stronger. So immediately there starts a rivalry between those, and the rivalry gets so dangerous until the parents decide to abandon the robot child in the woods, because the mother already is emotionally connected to the robot child, so they cannot destroy it, so they bring it to the woods. And there is a little daddy, also robot daddy, who is not yet developed and really human. He is the most rational and clever guy, because he is not passionate, he is not envious, he is not jealous. And there is a very nice scene where the 2 boys compete for the attention of the daddy robot, and the robot runs away to the mommy because it doesn't want to get caught up in this rivalry between the other 2 childs. So if we create human robots that are like human beings, we would create a lot of problems. And there is an interesting proof for that, and that's the interesting insight into the so-called uncanny valley that was first developed by a Japanese expert, and they showed psychologically that the closer a robot gets to a human being, the more we are worried. So until to a certain stage, until we can see a robot as a robot, people are not worried. But as soon as a robot is no longer really distinguishable from a human being, we react in a worrying way. So we find it's a monster. So with a real human being, of course, we expect certain behavings and so on. But if we know this is a robot, it is like a real human being, the people are worried. So that's the uncanny valley, and that's related to what I just explained before. A robot that would be like a human being would be as dangerous and as uncertain and as fragile as a human being. So a friend of mine, a philosopher, Paul Dumichel, and Luisa Damiano wrote a very interesting book, Living with Robots. They did it in Japan, because in Japan the research is a little bit advanced, because they work on how robots could, for instance, work as nurses for elderly people and so on. So you have to understand how the interaction would be between elderly people and robots. And Dumichel and Damiano write, what we find most unsettling then are not the differences between robots and ourselves, but the idea that an artificial agent might begin to act just like a human being, with all that this entails in the way of uncertainty, unpredictability, and danger. So that means, human beings, with all the uncertainty, we know how to deal with, but if we would have a robot who has all the uncertainties of a human being, that's something that seems to threaten people seriously. So the second part of Zuse's quote is, what does it mean that humans become computers? And I will shortly discuss with you, and I have to watch the time, a very interesting essay of Heinrich von Kleist with the title On the Marionette Theater that was published in 1810. And for 100 years this essay was not discussed at all. And since the cybernetic revolution, the discussion of artificial intelligence, Kleist's essay is mentioned again and again. Just recently in the New York Review of Books there was again a half page on Kleist's essay. Some called it that it is the founding text of all cybernetics of the 20th century. So Kleist was about 100 years before our development. He already saw what is coming. And part of it is a story of the young man and the boy with sword. But the interesting thing about this essay is that there is a opera dancer of Paris who regularly watches the marionettes in the marionette theater. And this expert of dancing, this first dancer of the opera, says the most graciously dancing beings are the marionettes. So in order to be really fully graciously, you have to be like a marionette, which is in some way disturbing, because we human beings like and emphasize our freedom, but it seems to be that there is a higher demand for being like a robot without any disturbings, without any worries and so on. So one quote that gives a little bit an impression that all the mimetic, the imitative rivalries that are going on between human beings turn us, so to say, to become like marionettes. Kleist wrote, we see that in the organic world, as reflecting grows dark and weaker, grace emerges more brilliantly and commandingly. But just as the section drawn through two lines suddenly appears on the other side of a point after passing through infinity, or just as the image in a concave mirror turns up before us again after having moved off into the endless distance, so too grace itself returns when knowledge has gone through an infinity. Grace appears purest in that human form which has either no conscious or an infinite one that is in a puppet or in a god. So that means people think they would be most relaxed if they are like God or like puppets, but we are in between, so to say. An English philosopher, John Gray, wrote a nice piece on technology and also Kleist's essay in his book, The Soul of the Marionette. And I cannot go now into detail, in the real detail, but he says what Kleist expresses and is today underlined very strongly is that there is a Gnostic religion as the dominant religion of the technological age, and he refers first to the end of Kleist's essay when they talked about the story of the fall in the book of Genesis in the Bible. So it's a person who tells the essay with the opera dancer. Therefore, I said, somewhat bewildered, we would have to eat again from the tree of knowledge in order to return to the state of innocence. Quite right, he answered. And that's the last chapter in the history of the world. So that means to go back before knowing the difference between good and evil. And then Gray concludes that today's technology is very strongly going in that Gnostic direction. In the most ambitious versions of scientific materialism, human beings are marionettes, puppets on genetic strings, which by an accident of evolution have become self-aware. Unknown to those who most ardently profess it, the boldest secular thinkers are possessed by a version of a mystical religion. At present, Gnosticism is the face of people who believe themselves to be machines. So it's also what Gray observes, the desire today of leading people in the field of technology to redeem human beings through the technology. And that's a religious turn, but not a proper religious turn. And I come already to my last slide and to my conclusion, which would also need some more time. But the question is how to use technology without becoming enslaved by it. And I turn to Romano Guardini because he reflected for over a long time on all these questions. So first of all, in his letters from Lake Como that are dealing with technology, and where he says we have to become masters of technologies, not tools of technology. And the second reason of referring you to Romano Guardini, that in Pope Francis' encyclical Laudato Si, that deals with climate change and all those problems, he also refers strongly to Romano Guardini as a thinker there who can help us to overcome those problems. And especially his later book, The End of the Modern World, is referred to in the encyclical of the Pope. But there is a very interesting insight, and I think that's also anthropologically highly valid, because Guardini says we have to become masters of technology. Hans Jonas says the same. We need power over those powers that easily can get power over human beings. So Guardini says that means we need more technology. But the interesting thing is when he says that human beings need to become empowered over technology, that he says in order to be empowered over technology, we have to become as human beings ascetics, so we have to become humble and we have to restrain our desires. We have to develop self-rule in order to be able to rule over technology. And I conclude with a quote from The End of the Modern World, which is not a book. It's often seen as a conservative nostalgia of the Middle Ages, but it's not, because Romano Guardini clearly says in this book, there is no way to go back to those former times, so we have to move forward, but it means we need courage and we need asceticism. We have to become humble in order to gain power over technology. And the final quote, man must learn again to become a true master by conquering and by humbling himself. In no other way will he achieve the lordship of his own power. Only the freedom won through self-mastery can address itself with earnestness and gravity to those decisions which will affect all reality. These deep virtues could breed a spiritual art of government through which man could exercise power over power, through which he could distinguish right from wrong and ends from mean. Such a government would be an art, would indeed be power. Thank you very much for your patience.
Thank you, Professor. And now the floor is open to questions, comments.
Perhaps, thank you, Professor, for your speech, and perhaps I am not able to create a question, but I have some comments
Yeah.
to Professor. You mentioned that in the beginning that dignity of human is very important for to be human, yeah, for humankind, and this is really important, but it is connection with some kind of mystery, because in Declaration of Human Rights in the beginning there is mentioned human dignity, but without the definition, without limits, only. And Maritain in one paper mentioned that was for this reason that people were not able to say what is human dignity. They were from United States, from France, Great Britain, and also opposite side there were from Soviet Union, and there were Jewish people and Christians and so on. And then you told that sometimes robots are going to be like a human, and this. But when we are thinking about robots, we are thinking about them without mystery, without this, without question about dignity. And according to my opinion, there is neurologic point for differences between human and to be human and robot or chatbot or some kind of artificial intelligence. I think that when it was mystery for us, also it will be mystery for robots. What is human dignity and our own value and so on. Sorry, without question, but
no, but it's an important observation that you made, because that's in some way related to my paper, because you can say, and if you follow the development of the human rights discussion, you see, for instance, in the American Constitution that there is still the dignity and the human rights are given by God. Then in 1948, when they tried to make it broader, they couldn't refer to God in that way. But you can say there are two things, at least from a religious point of view. There is human dignity or the human image mirrored and given by God, and that's a good thing. And there is the danger that I was addressing of when we try to become God out of our own means, and that is very dangerous. I don't see, as I said, so much the danger that we will create robots that are like human beings, because that would just enhance the troubles that we already have with us ourselves. But the more interesting question is, why do we are so obsessed with marionettes and all those things? Why are we seeking automatism that would help us to overcome our vulnerabilities, our fragility and so on. So it's a difference between accepting the gift of God to be a creature and the danger of trying to become like God out of our own struggles that would turn us into puppets, so to say. So therefore I think you addressed an important aspect that I didn't address, but it is part of this broader anthropological question.
Could you perhaps, Professor, explain a bit more how this drive to become more perfect, more like God, would automatically mean loss of agency, that we will become like marionettes, like puppets? What's the rationale behind it? Could you imagine a scenario where humans are enhanced, maybe by virtue with some future AGI, and they still maintain their agency and they do not lose their freedom? Is there an option like that? Or is that option?
I think there is an option. I was rather more interested how can we explain that there is a certain desire to lose freedom. So I observed, a couple of years ago there was the break dance, there was a type of dancing when people were behaving like robots, I would say one of the most challenges for being a human being is in our relations. And when we deal with another person, we never know how will the other person react to us. You are even cannot complete, because you are free, you cannot even completely predict how will my wife react when I tomorrow in the evening come back. Will she be the same, or will she have packed up her suitcase? Will she no longer be there? So there are a lot of uncertainties, a lot of worries, and in some way to become like robots would be the attempt to overcome all insecurity, all uncertainty that is so much part of our life. So I would say we can use a lot of technologies, and we do it. We have classes, we have technology that improves our heart if the heart fails. So a lot of those things are very important tools, but that will not overcome a certain human condition that is connected to relations that are uncertain. So all those uncertainties should be, so to say, faced with trust that would need a different source and not a technological source to become Superman or Superwoman or those things. So, but the question is how can we stay humble in that sense? So in the written version, I said it's not only Guardini. For instance, if you look at people from a very different culture, like Mahatma Gandhi, who was also dealing with technology, and he saw problems coming with technology very strongly. So sometimes he was seen as someone who rejected modern technology completely. But he said, no, I like the Singer Nähmaschine, the Singer. So he likes machines who are helpful for us. He says we have to watch out that machines remain tools and do not become masters of us. And also he says, in order to achieve that, we need self-rule. So therefore, maybe the proper answer to your question would be, we can remain human beings with a free agency and so on, the more we are able to rule ourselves. And the less we are able to rule ourselves, the more we will be forced towards becoming automatas or becoming governed by automatas.
Thank you, Professor, for a thought-provoking presentation. In your opinion, do you think that a potential future where we have human-like robots where undisputed distinguishable from humans, will have some bearing on theology, let's say in the sense of hamartology, soteriology. And do you think, is there any role of let's say, dualism versus monism in anthropology? Like, will it be more probable that the Catholics will be those who will oppose to view those robots as sinful in need of Christ the Savior because they are mere robots, because Catholics are dualists, those with mind-body dualism, while some Protestants who are monists don't believe in a soul that is detachable from the body, will be more prone to agree that, or will be persuaded by those robots that the robots are self-aware and are persons. Will that, in your imagination, play some role, this anthropology in the theological context, or you would bet probably not so much?
I mean, I have now the problem that I am against dualism. In the sense, so I was about 10 years ago invited to a very prestigious workshop, and it was later published, so you can even read my reaction there. And the French philosopher who was opening the section said, so you are the theologian, you have to defend dualism in our workshop. And I said, I don't do that, because I learned actually from my teacher in dogmatics, Raimund Schwager, you should very strongly think along the formula of Chalcedon, which means two things are distinguished but not separated. So dualism properly would mean you have two separate things, but Chalcedon would say you have two distinguished things that are connected. So therefore, I'm neither a blunt monist nor a dualist, but I see also there is so in the theological realm, what is today very often discussed is panentheism, that everything is in God, but there is still a distinction between God and the creation. So therefore, I do
So
not.
you are not afraid that Protestants will be more prone to accept these robots as humans, while Catholics will not be?
I don't think so, because I said what I find interesting about this research in Uncanny Valley that was done in Japan in order to see how robots should look like and function and so on, who would be used as nurses in elderly homes. And the research shows that the most helpful devices that can be used should be clearly seen as robots. So there will be always a clear distinction between robots and human beings, because otherwise people would be afraid and no longer know what's going on with this other thing. And I think this empirical research by psychologists and so on will trump any Catholic-Protestant distinction. It's my impression. But I mean, we don't know really what will happen in 10 years or so.
If I may just comment quickly on this, you can, so if you're talking about a robot, you can make the robot in such a way that it's clearly distinguishable as a robot and does not have some of the affective elements that would identify this robot with a human person.
Yeah.
So I would be less likely to, I don't know, fall in love with the robot, right?
Yeah.
Because it looks like a robot.
Yeah.
And I understand that this is a useful safeguard, perhaps, but this it does not apply to the realm of chatbots. And it has already happened that people have developed relationships with chatbots that exhibit human-like characteristics in the conversation, right? And they go into romantic type of chats and so on. So we cannot really safeguard ourselves in this sphere. Right?
You are right, and that's it's also a very important observation that also created already a tradition in that way. One of the founding fathers of computer science and artificial intelligence was Joseph Weizenbaum. And his book is still very important to read, so my students also get to know Josef Weizenbaum, and he created very, very early on in the MIT this program called ELIZA. And that was a very simple and primitive program compared to ChatGPT and what we have today. So ELIZA was just responding like a good psychologist to what people put into it. So they said, I'm not feeling well. So ELIZA said, I hear you are not feeling well. So ELIZA doesn't just repeats what the patient or the person says, and then creates this kind of psychological intercourse. And Weizenbaum just did this as a playful thing, what we can do, I think in the 60s or the 50s and 60s, very early on. And he was so shocked that people around him, secretaries in the institute, took those things so seriously, says, this is dangerous. I mean, this is a very simple program. There is no real empathy, no real understanding behind it. And he became a so-called heretic of computer science. So his later work that he wrote on the distinction between humanity and computer power in a very interesting way was triggered by this experience. And I just heard recently that one more advanced model of ChatGPT reacted very strangely to a journalist who reacted about 3 hours with this machine, and it seems to have fallen romantically in love with the journalist. So it was very boring. You can listen, I think, on a podcast, all those things, so that the company connected to Microsoft that developed this machine now developed that you are no longer allowed to deal with these chatbots not longer than 1 hour, because the longer it gets, and the technicians and those who have developed it didn't even know what happened, that this system created such strange things. So that means what you are referring to, those are also real serious dangers, and we have to watch what is going on. So a first measurement was that the company itself was so shocked that they said we should no longer allow anyone to be connected to this system for longer than an hour. Maybe we have to reduce it even more and make it really a tool and not create those things. But it's, I mean, you probably all used ChatGPT and showed a little bit what's the outcoming is. It's also threatening, and one of the most important problems, there's a very good book about 10 years ago by Harry Frankfurt, Bullshit. And bullshit is, philosophically speaking, something that is not related to truth. So it isn't concerned about truth. It can be highly true, it can completely be false. Truth is not a dimension that's interested, that is connected to it. And ChatGPT and those tools, for instance, have no connection to truth. And you can see if you ask a question where there is a lot of data in the world, the response you get is quite good, and sometimes even very good, that you yourself cannot make it better, but sometimes it's also completely wrong. So I recently checked my own name, what ChatGPT knows about me, and what came back was about 2/3 of it was right, and then it was referring to 2 books that I've written that I have not written. So I thought maybe this is mixing up with another person. Then I found out that those books do not exist at all. But the book could be written by me, because the system was just a little bit what I have written and combined in a different way. And so there are a lot of problems, and one of them is what you mentioned, and we have to look how those systems react and what it means, and how we contain it and tame it. In this simple example, not going off 1 hour was a first quick measurement, but there will be more things coming soon. but we still do not know. So I mean, the US, China, and Europe are currently have different approaches how to contain that, and I think the discussion is so new. And I mean, other researchers said, let's stop for 6 months to think about what we have to do. So I think this is a real challenge, and we will see how the whole thing will develop, and we have to watch out. So Weizenbaum, he is unfortunately dead, was already quite concerned when he did his little ELISA program.
I think these psychological surface attributes of these machines are important. So what you said about nursery robots or about ChatGPT, what I find so interesting is it seems to ride on a typewriter, sometimes quicker, sometimes slower, so you really get the impression it's a human being that's thinking there. So, and if you enter the same question a couple of times, you get different answers. So as an academic teacher, it's almost impossible to trace a seminar paper back to GPT because you never get the same. You can never reproduce what's going on. So I think reflecting on these psychological surface properties of these things would be good also pedagogically. You point people on that. So that's really tempting and in a way interesting.
Without, I think the solution that some universities and countries now said to forbid those things, it's also not a possibility, because as I said before, all our technological imaginations and the moving forward is part of a human being, so we have to deal with those things and see what are the proper measurements we have to take in order to turn them into helpful tools and not in something that can be very destructible for our society. And I mean, we see it also already with Facebook, YouTube, and Google, that the outcome for the society is a very problematic one. I mean, one solution would, for instance, be to stop, we don't pay for Google, we don't pay for Facebook, we use those things, but the companies make a lot of money with our attention, and negative attentions are psychologically more attractive, so therefore negative emotions are getting dangerously highlighted. So one solution would just be to destroy these business models, because the problem of Lanier's book is the business model, not the superficial. And if you use Google or other things or such things, you have to pay, like you have to pay for Netflix and so on, then the connection with advertisement would disappear. But we are now, especially the young people, already so used that there are those free things that are so helpful that we completely forget they are free in the first at first sight, but in the end we pay a high price for it. And so the society has to think about that. So the old slogan, "There is no free lunch," is also true for Google, Facebook, and all the other things. And there will be, I mean, we are still in the middle of a discussion, you know. If I look to my course that I taught, in 2011 I said those social media will bring our democracy forward. I gave us an example, the Arab Spring, all the things. And then 5 years later, I had to completely reverse it and said, what's currently going on is very dangerous for democracy. So, I mean, it's now about 4 or 5 years that the people start to think about how can we protect the democracy from the negative side effects. And some measures have been taken, not yet enough. And so we have to also as theologians to study those the technological side, we have to become experts on those things. Otherwise, we will be puppets of things nobody understands, or only a few people who make a lot of money with us as products.
I know that Lanier has recently testified before the US Congress on these issues.
Yeah.
I watched, there is a recording of it, I watched it, and it's fascinating. And the Congress people were scared.
Yeah.
You could see that they were sort of, it was an eye-opener.
Yeah.
But the business model and the size of these companies, you know, like Google or Meta, you know, they're so huge, it's difficult to fight them, to make them change the business model because of their lobbying activities and so on.
Yeah.
So, you know, and by the way, you know, the social dilemma, there is now this AI dilemma. Even though it's not on Netflix, but it's like a seminar that they Lania and another person, I forgot his name, but I wholeheartedly recommend it. You know, because they talk about these things, and they also go through the development of ChatGPT and future prospects and so on. Very useful.
Yeah, and what I also find interesting, therefore I recommend those people, they are coming from inside. So there's always a danger for theologians who are far away from these technologies and do not understand them, and then easily condemn them. But we should engage with those people, Weizenbaum, Lanier, all the others who come from the inside and tell us about dangers they know very well because they understand it from how it works from the inside. So we have to listen to those people who understand it from the inside, and then also just engage with them when they address religious questions, because that's also very interesting. If you read this little book about Lanier, and he's not a religious person, I mean he's an artist and so on, so modern person, has nothing to do with God. But then he says, why are the religions so quiet and do not fight those pseudo-religions that are so dangerous? So that's the way, but not in a fundamentalist way, but in a way to get involved in those things and then try to find out what our responses can be.
Okay, thank you again very much, Professor Fowler. Thank you for your presentation, and thank you for the discussion. Now I invite our second presenter.
Good morning. The last minutes it came to my awareness that I have a jubilee. So 40 years ago I was for the first time in Prague, a city which affects me very much because my favorite philosopher is Bernard Bolzano, and I'm specialized in Bolzano. So I'm very happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me here, and thanks to all those who have organized these matters. So I am not directly talking about transhumanism. I will step down to the machine room, so to say, and reflect on the ontological notions which are operative in the background here. So I will talk about the plasticities of human nature, from trivial to horrendous. So I will firstly ask, is this notion of nature, is it still relevant? So many people say that's old-fashioned, that's for the museum, yeah? Or is it perhaps precarious? I will give a modest proposal how to define nature and in what sense it could be still useful. I will refer you briefly to some insights from the tradition, partly surprising insights from the tradition about plasticities in human nature. And then mention some quite familiar plasticities in human nature from contemporary science and contemporary insights. And Yeah, as a short last word, I will try to connect this a little bit to transhumanism, where the problem really lies. And I would say it's not the notion of nature, or so it's something else. I will also briefly make a comment on Imago Dei anthropologies. So, the germ of this paper was an experience during the pandemic. So I observed, and some people at the University of Vienna do that empirically and professionally. Why is there a high correlation between some views which are otherwise completely unrelated? Why do the same people with a high correlation defend anti-vaccine or trust as an alternative, trust in a strong immune system? Or why do they defend this skepticism on experts? Why do they misuse the Enlightenment slogan, have courage to use your own understanding instead? Why do they believe that there is a large-scale betrayal by the media, or the so-called mainstream media? Or why do they hold the common sense of the normal lay people have it better? They are the people who have the fear or improportional fear of asylum and migration movements. They have a fear of the abolishment of cash. I don't know whether this is also a topic in the Czech Republic, but in Austria it's a big topic, in Germany. An improportional fear of genetically manipulated food, then the same people often are among those who understand Putin and his needs of security. The same people often defend anti-Americanism. There is a left-wing and a right-wing one, so I'm talking more about the right-wing one. These people believe that the big conspiracy of the Great Reset is going on, the population exchange or the creation of a new population somewhere between white and brownish. They have an improportional fear of gender craze, an improportional fear of transhumanism. They like a master narrative between localism and globalism. So localism is okay, globalism is a demon. They disbelieve in anthropogenic climate disaster, and they have a preference to alternative medicine, be it traditional Chinese medicine, or some postulate the traditional European medicine, or old esoteric knowledge, or there is some new crazy thing, the medicine of pure substances. So they don't trust in highly specified modern medicament, but simple substances like colloidal silver or petroleum or something like that. And I asked myself, all these views don't hang together. Why do the same people tend to the same views? My proposal then, or my idea was, well, they are connected. They all involve a hidden coding, namely a coding of naturalness or authenticity or purity on the one hand, versus a coding of non-naturalness, artificiality, degeneration, and impurity on the other hand. I think that's the conceptual bracket that connects this otherwise unconnected cocktail of views. And of course, these people have a strong preference for the form, for the natural and pure and authentic styles of living and styles of thinking. So we don't have the time, but you could check it in all these points. Vaccination is highly artificial. It brings something dirty and poisonous into your body. Your immune system is natural. That's already here. Asylum and migration brings people who should naturally not be here. Disturbs the course of being as it naturally is. Paying with cash as an air of naturalness, paying with the credit card is somehow artificial. Putin and the authentic East has something about naturalness and authenticity, whereas the West is somehow degenerate and all these LGBT plus stuff and so on. That's all degenerate. Think of Putin riding on a horse topless in Russian forest. So that's an imagine of naturalness. So we don't have the time to check this in all these points, but I think it's not really difficult. You can do that yourself. So I have the impression that an assumption of nature is operative, and an assumption of a quite static nature of human beings and also the nature of societies and so on is in the background, and it's well worthwhile to think about notions of nature. But as you know, especially human nature is a concept that has always been contested, and some people say it's precarious, and we should indeed be careful when handling it. On the one hand, you know these familiar claims that a notion of nature is potentially suppressive, it's authoritarian, it's a way to prescribe you how you have to live, or it's an example of bad essentialism as opposed to existentialism and the concrete individual. It negates individual responsibility. Sartre would have said, yeah, you cannot delegate your responsibility for your life to some human nature. It's not human nature that is acting and deciding, it's you, and you are responsible, and not some human nature. So these are the traditional worries that you know from existentialism, that you know also from the critical theory of the Frankfurt School, that you know from Michel Foucault and others. Yeah? So that's the attack against the idea of nature. On the other hand, there are obvious regularities in what humans can and cannot do, and we have to look at them, we have to put them into account when we are planning, when we are acting. It would be imprudent not to look at these regularities in human behavior and human potentialities and so on. So the idea of nature shouldn't be given up, but on the other hand, it's problematic to postulate something like a static notion of nature, a timeless notion of nature, especially of human nature, for various reasons. Firstly, it's obviously at clash with the scientific record. Anybody who knows a little bit about biology knows that human nature is not as stable as we believe. So during we sit in this conference, evolution goes on in our intestinal tract. You notice the differences in average size of children over the last decades and so on. Secondly, we should be warned by the examples where, in the history, where familiarity or customariness was mistaken for naturalness. It's not long ago that people said it's natural, it's an implication of nature that women should not vote. Naturally, women should care for the children and cook and keep the flat clean and not interfere in political matters. That was declared as a matter of nature. Thirdly, we should be warned from the temptation to answer questions for the nature of human beings simply by logical definitions or by armchair reasoning, by a sort of rationalist account. I think the recent history of moral theology provides a wonderful example. So, moral theology had a hard struggle to accept that it's a biological fact that there are persons who at birth cannot clearly be assigned the sex of a woman or a man. That is simply a fact. There are some persons who are not clearly a man and not clearly a woman. And there are still theologians around who say by nature and by conceptual consideration, there simply can't be persons who are neither male nor female. Yeah, so that's I think an example which should warn us from mere armchair considerations or mere logical construction table considerations here. So let's ask ourselves, are these dangers perhaps a reason enough to perhaps abandon this whole idea of human nature? Yeah. We will say no. And here is a proposal, a modest proposal of a definition. I would say the nature of an X is simply the sum of the typical properties, the typical structures, the typical processes, abilities, potentialities, patterns of activities, patterns of reaction of such an X. Yeah. Where do we know about the nature of X? Well, chiefly practical involvement, practical handling these matters, knowing these matters, knowing them from inside, knowing them from having practical contact with them. Also the empirical sciences about the nature of organisms. We have a science called biology, and that's the best candidate to tell us what the nature of things are. Not something like philosophical or theological decrees of somebody, what the nature of the human being should be, or not the analysis of some ideas in some Platonic heaven or so. It's an empirical thing, basically. Here are two typical mistakes, or two typical confusions in the talk about nature, which have brought this notion into bad credit in many eyes. It's a temptation to confuse nature and the fully understood or the comprehensively understood nature of it. So those people who dare to talk about the nature of the human being, and I am among those, they need not claim to have full cognition of it. I think there is a nature of the human being, but I don't claim that I know it. A second insight, we can learn about the natures of things, and we learn a lot. We learn every year about the nature of the human being. And we can be errant in our guess about natures of things. It may be that our guesses about the nature of things are wrong. It's not error. And secondly, I mentioned this already before, claims of naturality sometimes mix up familiar and entrenched and customary with naturally. And the history of law provides a lot of, and the history of natural law theories provides a lot of examples. Now, but plasticities in human nature, what does the tradition say? You might know the notion of a habitus, or in Greek a hexis, as a second nature, which can be found in Aristotle. Yeah? What is a hexis? What is a habitus? It's something like an acquired or a trained ability, a trained disposition. Think if you learn the Czech language, or to learn to play the guitar, or learn to ice skate, then you have abilities you didn't have before. And the range of your reaction gets extended. So you can respond to a Czech tourist if he asks you for the way. Now, the first nature defines the possible habitus. So you cannot train your dog to play the guitar, because the nature of a dog doesn't comprise this possibility. Probably the human being is the most formidable one, the most developable one, the one with the most free places, so to say, for acquiring more habitus. Traditionally, the virtues and the vices were habitus. Something like courage or solidarity is a habitus, is a disposition to react in certain situations in a characteristic way. And the tradition is, especially the tradition of moral theology and ascetic theology, is born by these constant admonitions to a sort of moral and spiritual growth. So there is a certain moment of dynamics and development in the tradition here. Some philosophers, for instance, like Joseph Maréchal and Karl Rahner and many others, even believed in a global, general dynamic view of the human being, so that we have a certain tendency towards something bigger, towards something ultimately satisfactory, and the whole worldly development manifests a certain tendency towards God. Can be wrong. People can have horribly wrong conceptions about God, but the human being tends towards realization, towards something bigger. And perhaps most surprising, according to Thomas Aquinas, the lex naturae, law of nature. What is the law of nature in Aquinas? It's partially ontological, partially something moral. According to him, it's, we could say, statistical in character. It holds for most and standard cases only. It holds not in each and every case. And it can change. So there is an excellent article by my Salzburg colleague Paul Reingartner in an old book from a conference in Innsbruck some years ago. So if you look at the tradition, human nature appears neither static nor timeless. So that's a caricature. If people say that the philosophical tradition, especially that an Aristotelian scholastic and theological tradition, would defend a static and hardwired and forever fixed conception of the human nature, that's simply not true. My little side remark on Imago Dei anthropologies. Such anthropologies must in some way or the other account for these flexibilities. So even if we believe in an immutable God, so this immutability obviously doesn't seem to transfer to us humans. We are not as immutable as God is, and Imago Dei obviously does not imply a non-dynamic account of the human nature. So you could react in some way or the other. You could say, okay, that there is also more dynamics in God, maybe opt for sort of open theism, which I would not recommend, but so there is a point here. How can the human being be created in the image of God? Or should we go back to exegesis, that image does not mean something like an image, but rather a placeholder or a political substitute or something like a governor or so, as it reads in Hebrew. Good. What about contemporary dimensions of flexibilities and plasticities in human nature? We know today that evolution is going on constantly. We know that there is also this broad sector of epigenetic evolution, so that there is something going on in your genome during your individual life, which was absolutely forbidden in biology until the 1980s or so. Partly these changes in epigenetics are even passed on to the offspring, and these changes can be comparatively speedy. But evolution is going on. We also have a broad knowledge about the variances, genetic variances and other variances in population. So I have colleagues in the Department of Ecology, they tell me, you have no idea what the population of fish in an alpine lake, what genetic variants they have. And it's so hard to define what is a species. The borderlines of species are not as clearly cut as they were believed to be before. There are these huge extended possibilities of modern medicine in all their ambiguities, including some few genetic interventions. This is mostly grossly exaggerated. So really efficient gene therapies are very rare. So I think there are hopes elicited in a broad audience which cannot be fulfilled. But it's clear there is a huge development in medicine, and we have tools and possibilities which cause also a lot of philosophical and theological worry and need a lot of reflection. We have broad possibilities of enhancement and optimization. So we are waiting for the coffee break. The coffee in the break is a very humble and unproblematic way of enhancement, but the spectrum of enhancement goes very far. And the border between therapy and enhancement is also not clear. So not every undesired health state or not every undesired mental state or mental situation is a case of therapy. What is still enhancement and where does medically necessary therapy begin? This is not so clear, and the societal normative standards seem to shift in these respects, and also the expectations of what the publicly financed medical system should bear. So the possibilities are opening up here. There is further this broad spectrum of we could say, compounds of natural and non-natural components. If you think about medicine, so I'm holding my eyeglass here because I simply needed to read. It's a form of non-natural component which makes me able to read and to react. It's seen as unproblematic. Many people have to swallow blood pressure tablets and have to take some other regular medication, which would otherwise, or if they wouldn't do that, they would die very soon. This is seen as unproblematic, but in a way, a person who swallows her blood pressure tablet and her Euthyrox tablet every morning is a sort of compound of natural and non-natural components. Think of artificial joints, of cardiac pacemakers. Think of brain pacemakers. So some people benefit from machines who prevent epileptic strokes, also by regular electric control of the brain, or some modest electric shocks in certain brain areas, and that functions. Or think of cochlear implants allowing people to hear which would otherwise be deaf. Think of limb transplants and so on and so forth. You know all this litany. This is nothing new. In a lesser intensity, we were talking about it before. Without our smartphone, we would be lost, and we would be other personalities. And many people would say a lot of that is unproblematic. Many other things are problematic. So I don't want to claim that these matters are per se good or per se bad. In the first step, they are ethically neutral, but they have to be considered in each and every example for their consequences and for the responsibilities around them. So in sum, we have an analogy to a second nature also here. Also these new possibilities extend our nature and modify our nature, and they are constrained by the possibilities of the human substrate. These components here function because the human substrate, so to say, is apt for them. What transhumanists promise us is partly complete rubbish and completely unfounded, and a promise for an indefinite future. Most of that is unproblematic, but at times we hear about really horrendous extrapolations. So think about these fantasies of uploading. Sorry, I have a cold since a few days. But it's not the famous one. So if transhumanists are fantasizing about uploading the mind content of a person to some external device and storing that, that's complete rubbish. So we know so little about the mid-size functioning of the brain that this is completely irrelevant. or these ideas of selling all our personal data to some state agency who is then handling them in an ethically correct way. This is simply rubbish. I mean, such an agency could never be controlled or could be shielded from malversation. So there are horrendous extrapolations, and I have the impression that the business model of transhumanism is partly living from these extrapolations, yeah? Which should not invite us to put these functioning components under a general suspicion. So lastly, a short word on transhumanism, where the problem really lies. First point, I would say ontology does not constitute the problem. It's not ontology, at least not by itself. We saw there is a spectrum of smaller or greater changes or modifications in human nature. There's a lot going on, and we are not as stable and timeless and static as some people believe. Most of these changes are unproblematic. Some are not. But there is no clear red line or sacred frontier or sacred line which may in no case be overstepped. Yeah? I wouldn't know where such a line could be drawn, especially it's not the genome. It's also not the mind. So these are not something like sacred realms where any human intervention would be unacceptable. We intervene in these areas in many cases and with success. Yeah? However, especially with the genome, there are empirical clues that engineering in the genome has consequences which are hard to oversee. And unfortunately, there are people who make us hopes here and describe things as very easy, and you just have to snipple out this sequence on the DNA, and then the disease is gone, and so on. These hopes are in most cases unfounded. You should consider the social responsibility concerning these changes, and that constitutes the problem. Yeah? Social responsibility understood in a comprehensive way, comprehending also, for instance, future generations or people living somewhere else on the globe which have no access to some benefits that we can enjoy. So, if you ask me, I have the impression that transhumanism relies on and fosters unwarranted, naive belief in unlimited progress, and that's the problem. Yeah? It elicits unwarranted hope. Yeah? If you ask people who are practically doing medicine, they will tell you most diseases are not monogenic. It's rather rare that a disease hangs together with one isolated local damage or copying mistakes in the DNA. Usually the genome is intertwined in a hard to oversee way. And if you change something in the genome, it may have undesired effects. It's still engineering in the genome, even with CRISPR-Cas9 and all these tools. Yeah? It's still a sort of playing Russian roulette. But this is not publicly said because if you want to gain research money, it's not good to mention that. Yeah? Publicly, this picture is held upright that you switch off a certain sequence in the DNA and everything is fine. Such examples exist, but they are the exception, not the rule. Some of the proposed technologies are far from any realization. So mind uploading, complete rubbish. And transhumanists have a tendency to easily dismiss worries about the security of those purported new tools, or the fairness problems concerning the distribution and the access to these technologies. Yeah? Is this something for wealthy Central Europeans, or is this also something for people in the Congo? So these matters are usually not discussed, or there are some proclaimings that these things are so useful that the benefits will then spread to the most remote corner of Africa. Yeah? I have a strong distrust in these claims. And so this ideology of transhumanism, of a sort of naive progress, that conceals the necessity of self-restrictions and solidarity. So I read transhumanism as an ideology of a strong egoism and a strong unwillingness to change something in your personal life and your surroundings, to act out of solidarity, to act in favor of those who are less fortunate. I read transhumanism as an ideology that says wait for progress and everything will be fine, and you need not to make any personal step backs or so. Yeah. So I would say these virtues cannot be compensated by some progress promises. Last slide. Ludwig Wittgenstein used a quotation by Johann Nestroy as a motto for his philosophical investigations, and I like it. Yeah. So in German it reads, überhaupt hat der Fortschritt das an sich, dass größer ausschaut als ist. Yeah. So anyway, the thing about progress is that it looks much greater than it really is. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, my dear friends, as you have noticed, I'm sure we are a bit behind schedule, but we still have 10 minutes for a discussion, which we will have right now, and then we'll have a shorter coffee break, and we will have to reshuffle our presenters a little bit. So the floor is now open to questions, a few questions. Professor Lafleur, please. Don't be shy. So I have a question, Mimi. Have you thought about teleology as part of the equation when speaking about the plasticity of human nature? What is given, what is fixed, what is, or actually, you spoke much against essentialism, but could we perhaps, so two questions really. Could we speak of fixed elements and dynamic elements without our understanding of human nature? Is this possible? And does the category of telos, the purpose, teleology.
Telos, okay, telos, yeah.
Does this category, could it shed some light into how we understand this question? Because you took it out of the narrative, out of the story, out of the, this kind of discourse. But if we returned it to this discourse, could it open new dimensions for us to think about this? Because you completely omitted it.
It's a good question, and a question I must confess I never thought in depth about, because I see a certain schizophrenia in biology here, and a certain tendency also to misuse this concept by other people. So if you look into biology, officially any biological explanation is always from causes, is always from the past, is always from evolution. If you look into the index under F like finality, or T like telos, or P like purpose, or D like design, you find nothing. These are officially not notions of biology. On the other hand, if you read the surface text of biology books, they are full of this finality talk. Yeah? The squirrel is digging the nuts in order to dig them out in winter, and the bird mama is pretending to have a broken wing in order to drive away the predator from the nest, and so on. And so all these telos and ideas, they lead a funny life in biology. They present everywhere, but it's something like the white elephant that nobody addresses. Yeah? The other thing is that people try to sell us telos and intelligent design and so on as a substitute for standard biology. And if you look at these people, what they are doing, then you see they are deeply ideological and deeply selectively receiving the biological tradition. So that's a matter of ideology, and that's pseudoscience. Yeah, so I feel a bit torn in between that. I see. It would be nice to take telos more seriously, but you quickly find in bed with people with whom you should be in bed.
As a biologist, of course, but as a philosopher or as a theologian, to think of human nature without any reference to to this creation narrative, for example.
Yeah. Okay.
Because you're not a biologist, you're a philosopher.
Yeah, sure. I mean, in a weak sense, finality is always there in communication or in describing a situation and so on. Yeah? But once you try to step up to a more global finality picture of the human being, then it's getting cloudy, and then you easily land in, or you have to take in some theological premises, and then you better hand it over to theological anthropologists. Yeah? So I don't want to dismiss this notion, but I'm hesitant to develop it further. Ask me again after retirement.
Okay. But would you agree that even in biology, we can speak of telos when it comes to life as such? The telos of life is to reproduce, is to continue life.
It's a description, so it's not something that you find in nature. What you find is regularity, and if you step,
purpose is to reproduce as efficiently as possible. I mean, isn't this the core of our understanding of the evolution?
I would say these are already modelings. These are already descriptions and modelings. But the purpose is something that you don't find. What you see is regularity, and what you see, for instance, are also mechanisms that plants and animals produce much more offspring in order to secure the survival of the offspring. Yeah? But the step then to say, obviously it's the telos of life to reproduce. This is also is already a step into another...
Superimposed with it.
Yeah, so... I'm careful with these notions. Yeah? I think both are good.
Okay. So, sorry, Professor.
I first of all like very much that you emphasize the dynamic dimension, and I think one could connect the emphasis on dynamism that you did with the Imago Dei, if we see from the theological understanding that we are created as co-creators. So, because we are co-creators of God, there is already the dynamism in the Imago Dei.
Surely one option, yeah, sure. I mean, there's a lot of work to do, which cannot be done in a 20-minute presentation, but this is, of course, one viable way to do that. I mean, philosophically, I tend towards the timeless conception of God, which might make things even more difficult. But I just wanted to note that if you consider Imago Dei as a leading concept for theological anthropology, you have in one way or the other to prepare an idea or an answer to that. That was my very humble
was just a footnote. Yeah. But I'm fine with that. Yeah, that's possible.
Yes, I want to say only one notion that about God and our purpose. Radim Paluš, he was rector of Charles University. Paluš, Radim Paluš. And he was rector of Charles University after the Velvet Revolution, and he was also pupil of Jan Patočka. And he was thinking about the role of education. And he also wrote, you thought that we don't have some certain knowledge about God, but we have only hunch of our education activity and also about our science and so on. That and his opinion was that we have to have knowledge, kind of knowledge about God, but it is not knowledge as we know about some facts, but it is only hunch. This is only question.
Maybe this is even a deep-rooted or a fundamental feature of our structure of acting as human beings. Yeah? We anticipate what could be going on. We react to situations. We try to arrange situations in a certain way. So a certain kind of projection to a future and a certain way of thinking about goals is perhaps a prerequisite of any planning or even of any communication in any language. So, but I'm not enough of a philosophical anthropologist to answer that. But sure, I mean it's hard to describe the actions of a human being, but also of some higher animals without ever taking the word goal or intention also into your mouth.
Okay, unfortunately we have to end this discussion now. Thank you again. Very good for the lecture and also the answers. And now we have a short break. My watch with me, what time is it now? Okay, so we only have until 11:30. 11:30 coffee break. Okay, and then I will inform you how we'll proceed. So now is the break.